Welcome. I am Karen Lips, the president of the Network of Enlightened Women. In New, we work to educate, equip, and empower young women to be leaders for a free society. Today, I am joined by Rachel Gerli. She has worked in corporate retail for brands including One Kings Lane, Bed Bath & Beyond, Macy's department stores, Gap, Banana Republic, and Old Navy. So she knows a great product when she sees one. She's a graduate of Cornell and a mom. And while at Cornell, she started her first business. So welcome, Rachel. We are excited to have you on.
It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited to be talking with the ladies of New, and a special shout out to my home chapter at Cornell University. I can't wait to see you guys in the spring.
Wonderful. I'm sure they will appreciate that shout out. I know we've got their leader watching with us this morning, so I'm sure you will hear from her. So we'll just jump right in. I know you mentioned you started your first business when you were at Cornell. This month, November, is National Entrepreneurship Month. So can you tell us, how did you start that first business as a college student?
Yeah, absolutely. So while I was in college, I was enrolled in the School of Hotel Administration, which has this hospitality work requirement of 800 hours. So usually people work at the front desk, or they're waiters or waitresses in the restaurant. I'm too chatty for any of those tasks. So I had this idea. All these alumni were returning to campus to get married. We have a beautiful chapel at Cornell, a bunch of places for a reception. And during my time working in the hotel, I noticed that no one was really taking the clipboard from the bride on the day of. So she's on a budget, she plans this whole day, and then she's still cueing, her dad to say it's time for your toast, or calling an Uber when someone's overserved. So I decided to go into day of coordination. I called it Celebration Coordination. I put up a website. It was like day of wedding coordination, Ithaca, New York. No one else was doing this in Ithaca, New York. And believe it or not, people just started calling me. No one checked a reference. No one asked how many weddings I had done. So once I did the first wedding, I had photos for my website. I had a track record, and they just kept coming. So instead of, making $10 an hour as a bus girl in the school restaurant, I was making $2,000 a Saturday catering to these brides.
Wow.
And I kept that going for years. In the early part of my career, probably for 10 years. Every time I'd move to San Francisco, I'd move to New York, I would hang my digital shingle on the wedding wire or the knot, and people would call me. And it was a really, really fun way to make money on the side.
That's cool. So you really just took this step and did it. I know we hear from a lot of our students that they have an idea. What made you take that leap, and what was the scariest part of it?
So I think the conservative women on college campuses are uniquely equipped to take this step, because of all the entrepreneurs I've met and worked with, there's one thing that the best ones have in common. They're willing to challenge the status quo or see an opportunity that no one else sees. And that's something that conservative women contend with on campus every single day. You have to lean into what is a countercultural worldview in the environment you're in and defend it. So you see opportunity or ideas that no one else sees. It's like if someone asked Henry Ford in his day, what do people need? Like, what do people want? They would say faster horses. But he said, I see an opportunity for a car. And so I think that once you see something in the market that you could capitalize on, like, yes, you just have to do it. Like, you have to put up the website and see if anyone calls you. But the other thing is, you can't just be a visionary, you have to be a doer. And by showing up at new meetings, like, you've proven that you're already a doer. So how can you translate that into business? And so actually, I think that probably everyone on this Facebook Live is equipped in some way to start a business as a side hustle, even in college. And it's just about having the confidence to take that first step.
Yeah, you mentioned the side hustles, and a lot of our students have some or talk about doing those. And we've seen from DC and the federal government that there's some moves to regulate those more. If you could come to DC and change policy as an entrepreneur, what would you like to see happen, or what policies have hurt or helped you in your business journey?
That's a great question. Because when I was in college, internships were much more readily available because there wasn't so much legality around what you take away from them. So now I think you either have to get educational credit or a certain amount of payment. I was working on stipends, where someone says, we'll give you $100 a week if you can just like come and organize our files and write press releases. And those experiences were invaluable. And as the minimum wage gets higher and higher, what they're doing is pricing out a lot of internships. And as the standard of educational requirement becomes higher too, people are losing the opportunity to just side hustle 3 hours a week in their local wealth management office or be a bank clerk just to have that bank's name on your resume. And those were really valuable experiences, and they build your resume for when you're applying to your full-time roles.
They definitely do. Yeah, making those connections too. Could you talk about like mentoring, and did you reach out to anyone before you put up your little shingle, or did you just go for it on your own?
So in college for that particular venture, I didn't, but my whole career in corporate retail, working for big brands, has always been under the mentor of someone that came before me. And I think that especially like this set of women that you work with are all destined for bigger things. And it's so important to just remind us all to show up for our network, for this network. There's a lot of people sitting in the shade today because of trees that were planted a long time ago. So when you do start your side hustle and you need a second day of coordinator or a helper, come back here, go back to your new chapter, email them for interns. Lifting each other up is so important, and it doesn't always have to be in a mentor capacity. It can be in a peer-to-peer capacity, which has actually been a huge help to me in my career.
Yeah, can you talk about then, so you started the wedding business, then talk about your kind of career moves in corporate America. You've been worked for some major brands from Gap, Banana Republic. So I think our students would be really interested in hearing about that journey. And I'd be curious, how is that different than running your own business, kind of being in corporate culture?
Right, totally. Everyone thinks that entrepreneurs are dreamers, and founders often are, but I consider entrepreneurs also all the people that bring that dream to life. So you have to be a doer. And I was very fortunate, maybe not super fortunate, because I graduated in 2009 when kind of the economy just fell out from underneath us.
That was a rough time for job searching, wasn't it?
Oh my gosh. And I thought that I was going for a career in investment banks. I had interned at Citigroup. I thought I had this whole plan for my future and 3 new suits in the closet. And then all the banks reduced their headcount. They deferred the start dates a year. And I pulled a Hail Mary and I applied to every job on career services that didn't require a cover letter. All in one night. I must have dropped 100 resumes. And I got called by the Gap. I had never been to San Francisco. I didn't know a soul there. I went out for the assessment day and was so impressed by this whole career path that I didn't even know existed. So I was part of their rotational management program, which is a great option for when you're graduating school. It moves you through each of the brands. You learn inventory management. You learn how to source things from overseas based on designs that you see. You learn how to merchandise the store so that the front table is expected to do this much volume versus the things on the shelves in the back. It was really interesting, localizing by region. The Gap was a great place to work. It was so much fun. I loved San Francisco, but for family reasons, I moved back to New York and I started working at Macy's. So a recruiter had reached out to me at the Gap and I was keeping an open mind and I said, department stores? Okay. So I went from specialty retail to department stores and I hated it. Macy's is a lovely place to shop. It wasn't my speed. It was very slow moving on the career side. And I missed that entrepreneurial environment the Gap offered. But what I didn't realize is the woman that recruited me to Macy's went on to be one of the first employees at a new startup called One Kings Lane. So while I thought that I was just buying children's wear for this 100-year-old American apparel brand, I was being scouted for a position buying furniture and homewares for a brand new startup, and I had no idea. So that's when I learned that you just need to be undeniably good. Like whatever you do, be the best, most hardworking in your niche. There's no marketing buzzword, there's no trend you can ride that will substitute for that. So luckily she found me and I moved to One Kings Lane, which is my first kind of from the ground startup that I joined.
So how big was it when it started, and how big was it when that ended?
Yeah, so One King's Lane had lots of highs and lows, as you can probably read in the news, but it was certainly the ride of my life. It was really exciting in the beginning. It was a flash sale site for those that remember Gilt and Fab.com, which is no longer with us. Um, it became huge. I mean, at one point, almost a $1 billion valuation, which would have made it a unicorn. We were hustling like nothing you've seen before. I mean, flying down to North Carolina and going from factory owner to factory owner to convince them that you can sell sofas on the internet. Because no one thought you would buy a mattress or a sofa online without sitting on it. And we really challenged that. And in the end, it was huge, huge, huge. And then flash sales died. So we tried to pivot to a full price model. The volume just wasn't there. We ended up selling to Bed Bath & Beyond for under 12 million. So going from almost $1 billion to a $12 million sale, I went from my beautiful office in Soho with a view of the Hudson to a cubicle in New Jersey with a view of a gas station. And then you just learn that that happens in most startups. Your equity is worth nothing. Your work feels like it was worth nothing, but it really, the lessons learned there are worth their weight in gold. So I'm still grateful for the experience. It was so much fun.
Yeah, of course. And it's part of that learning experience. And I thought that would be interesting for people to hear about, is like almost getting up to $1 billion. And then the market changed, right? I mean, what people wanted changed.
Sure.
Talk about how you navigated those highs and lows.
Yeah. So 70% of startups fail in the first year. That number goes down a little bit if they're backed by venture capitalists who can often help connect you and give some guidance. But you never know when that bottom is going to drop out, when you're the one on the ground hustling, bringing the product to the site, securing the inventory, talking to the customers. You're not thinking about where the funding is coming from. But that's a really important side of the business as well, and an important network to build. The highs are so high because everyone feels like you're mission driven. You're going to create this thing. It's going to outlast you. It's going to sell for a ton and your equity will all be worth it. And when it's not, you have to take a step back and think, well, what do I really value about this experience? I value the people I've met. I've hired almost everyone that I've worked with a second time at a second company over the course of my career. I value the vendor relationships I've built. Currently, I'm doing consulting work for 2 of those vendors. And I valued that I learned what I wanted and what I didn't want when I were to start a startup of my own, both in management style and product category. So it's valuable no matter how it works out. You just have to take the risk.
So then what is on your plate now? I know we were talking that you've got a few different things. You mentioned the consulting. I know you're now founding another venture. Can you talk a little bit about what's on your plate now?
Yeah, so I have a few things in the mix besides the consulting, but the one that I think you all would be most excited about is called Primerrily. It's 2 R's, 1 L, like merrily down the stream. And it's a portmanteau of the New England Primer of Education, the first textbook in America, and A Merry American Life. So it's basically new for preschool. It's taking conservative principles and thinking, which children's books reinforce these? Like maybe it's not the rainbow fish who's bullied into giving all of his beautiful scales away so everyone can be the same, but instead it's the pout pout fish who recognizes that he's unique and he embraces it and he lives his fullest life in that way. So it's children's books, it's guides for kids about talking about big issues, like the presidential election. How do you talk to a 4-year-old about that, or about disasters, or about the Supreme Court? So we're having a lot of fun with it. Our kids are total guinea pigs. They went into craft overdrive yesterday for Veterans Day. You should see the patriotism happening in our arts and crafts space downstairs. But we really believe, as you do, that if you can change a generation, you can change the world. And what's talked about in the dinner table of this one becomes the politics of the next. So it's been so much fun. I can't wait to get some new interns in there next summer.
Yes, and what fun and what a joy to be able to do that with your children. I know the founders, some of the other founders on that venture as well, and it's got to be.
Yes, yeah, Allie Pullinger-Joy, who wrote a wonderful book that's great for college-age women, Bleeding Heart Conservatives, and Britt Reiner, who just successfully ran for her seat. She's an incumbent down in Sarasota, Florida, on the hospital board, and their children too are going through the ringer of learning all about civics at a very young age, so we can test if these philosophies and these lesson plans actually work.
That's great. I want to ask one more question, and then I'm getting texts from my team that we're getting lots of questions from.
Oh, good.
Please continue to ask those, and I will ask Rachel. So the last one for me is, what would be like one concrete piece of advice you would give to a college woman who's thinking about starting a business or has an idea?
Yeah, I mean, everyone will tell you the secret of getting ahead is getting started. And that's important, but it's also surrounding yourself with what I call like a tribal council of people that will give you really good advice, people that will help you look at your early results and say, oh, it just hasn't caught on yet, or there's not a market for this. You can save a lot of time by adapting early and just be agile enough to change your mind. We all know that there are so many famous entrepreneurs who are original thinkers that lean to the right. Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, because like in politics, people just don't know what they need. But if you think you know what people do need, if you see a hole in the market and you say, I can solve that, then try it out. Like reach out to me, reach out to someone else in the new network, find out how to manufacture your product or which website we recommend hosting just a splash page and see what the results are.
I really like that you mentioned solving a problem, because when I started new at UVA, I remember looking around and seeing there were other women's groups. There was the Women's Center, there was a Women's Studies department, but there wasn't a group focused on conservative women. And I thought there should be. I thought that was a problem. That was the problem I identified. And it's amazing that over the years, we've seen that there's conservative women all across the country who are looking for that network. It's just identifying that first problem and then taking that step to try to solve it.
Absolutely. And the conservative women isn't necessarily the network for any of the brands that I've started, but I'm connected to you and I'm connected to all of these other people through my conservative platform, through my conservative beliefs. And they have lifted me in so many ways that you would never think about, because it's really about developing this tribal council for the full person. It's to support you in your worldview, to support you in your family life, to support you in your business life. And then whatever side hustles or creative ventures you come up with. And that for me has been the people that I met through my political side, even though my chosen path is in retail.
Great. Well, let me turn now to audience questions. So first one is, since you graduated during rough economic times, which we talked about earlier, what advice do you have for women concerned about finding a job or opportunities because of COVID?
That's such a good question. So I've thought a lot about this and I've seen how some people have done it. And the people that I admire most, think about the job that they want. So like, what job do you want in 2 years or in 5 years? And what do you need to do in the next 2 years to be the best candidate for that job? So if you want to work in coding at a video game company, but right now you just have a computer science degree in college, maybe you need to start a blog about video games to show that you're passionate. Maybe you need to reach out to some people that work at video game companies and build your network so that you're well connected when a position becomes available. So if there's not a door, look for the window. If you're looking to change careers from maybe what your major would imply, develop some reputational expertise. Do things like this, like speak to the other women in your new chapter about what your chosen profession will be, make a blog about it, create an Instagram account that shows like news articles in that industry. Do something to kind of create a trail proving that you're the person that's passionate about this role, because you can't compete on experience in college, but you can compete on interest and knowledge.
That's great. So it's kind of taking some alternative steps, looking ahead. So you're preparing yourself for that next move.
Yeah, if you're applying to a bank, maybe start day trading.
Even if it is a little delayed, you can. Great. So next question from Charlotte, one of our interns. What is the most challenging obstacle you faced while trying to start your business, either your initial one or one down the road?
It's always finding the right people. Most recently, I worked on a startup that was rolling up pet stores, like mom and pop pet stores, to create a chain that was like a Whole Foods for pets. We wanted to have a spa, a grooming salon in every store. There are no groomers that are out of work in this country. I think we had 56 open positions in grooming. So there's very obvious gaps like that. And then there's gaps of people that are both equipped and hungry for the role. So finding someone to do the job is usually pretty easy in retail. Finding someone that's hungry for more, that's ambitious, and that wants to grow is a whole other story. And certain skills that are passe in other industries, or maybe just general macroeconomic climate, like picking up the phone and cold calling someone. When was the last time you did that? But if that's a requirement of the job you want, maybe you pick up some hours at a call center or volunteer on a political campaign to call people in your electorate to get out the vote. Then you can put that on your resume and work through the skills of the job that you want and find them in other ways. Does that answer your question, Charlotte?
Do you have advice? And do you have advice for how like women and men are different in the workplace, or how they might approach obstacles different, or anything you'd like to say specifically to women?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate that in retail, it is primarily women. I've had fantastic male bosses over the course of my career. Most recently, a gentleman that worked for like 28 years at Walmart. And so I got a little glimpse of how we operate differently, but women in retail tend to be very product driven, very customer driven. We feel like we need to get to know the person who's going to be buying and then choose the products with that person in mind. Men tend, so we buy from the gut. Men tend to focus more on what happened last year and how to improve upon it. So this product did well, let's just buy more.
Interesting.
And the dynamic is actually really healthy because you get a good balance of new things and trend and stalwarts that are going to pay the bills at the end of the day. And sometimes that reverses. There are, of course, analytical women and creative men. But in my experience, it's been fantastic to work with men in retail. I've never had a situation or I've never been treated differently, which I really appreciate.
That's great. And now Grace from Cornell has a question, which is, you've talked about the tribal council. What advice do you have for women looking for a mentor or trying to build that council?
Yeah, great question, Grace. So most colleges have an alumni database. So if you just come up with like the list of companies that you admire, like one thing that I would love to do one day in my retail career is get grocery experience. So maybe I'll look up Costco, Trader Joe's. I'll pull every woman that went to Cornell that works at one of those companies, and I'll cold email. And I'll say, hey, I'm Rachel. I graduated in 2009. I noticed you're at Trader Joe's. I'm also a buyer. I've never bought perishables. Do you have a half an hour just to tell me about your experience? Or if you see someone that's done a career transition that you want to emulate, that's another way in. The other thing is, see who donates to Turning Point at your campus, or to New, or to the College Republicans. See who's philosophically aligned with you, because a lot of older conservative patrons really want to lift up the next generation. I mean, if you succeed, we're all going to succeed. So I would just say public donation records are out there. If you're going to meet with someone or interview with someone, see if there are political donations. If it seems like safe space, mention your involvement in New, your leadership in that chapter, and kind of start building your network that way. You'll know when you have a match for your tribal council.
Thank you. That's great. Practical advice for students. I want to ask one last question about something you and I were talking about earlier, Rachel, which is running for office, because you are also an elected official. Can you talk about that and how kind of your entrepreneurial spirit fed into that run?
Yeah, absolutely. So I moved, when I had my son 2 years ago, I moved to Mount Kisco, New York, which is a suburb of New York City. And again, didn't know anybody, but saw someone going door to door, knocking with a clipboard. And I was like, what's going on here? So I reached out to the local Republican Party and I said, I'm happy to collect signatures on behalf of someone. And they said, oh, but would you like to run? And I said, I don't think so. I just moved here. And I said, oh, well, there's an uncontested seat for library board. Why don't you just list yourself? So I did. So I went door to door to every house in this neighborhood. I met every single one of my neighbors and asked them to sign this form so that I could be on the ballot for library board. I ran uncontested. I still only got 65% of the vote. So that's concerning on a lot of levels, personally and civics, education in this country. But now I serve down at the library, and it has helped me get so involved in my community so fast. And organizations like that are just dying for talent. So I had to be asked, but don't wait to be asked. When you move somewhere new, reach out to your local party chairperson, find out who's running and if you can support them, or if there are roles that are uncontested or need a challenger, just get started. How impressive would it be to see someone's resume come through who ran in an election, even if there's no hope of winning? I live in Westchester. The Clintons are this way and the Cuomos are that way, both down the street. There is no chance of winning as a Republican unless you're uncontested in this neighborhood. But it's super impressive to me that people still try. And if you have the time and you want to meet your neighbors, it's a good way to give it a go.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Rachel. That's good inspirational advice to end our talk on. And I think it shows how taking that step has been a theme throughout your career, whether it's starting the wedding planning business in college or moving from big corporate companies or running for office. So I hope that's something that our audience will take from this. It's having that courage and the confidence to take that first step, and you never know where it will truly lead. So thank you so much for being with us, Rachel. We appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And that step doesn't have to be big. You can shuffle, but just make sure you're in motion and things will happen.